Welcome to the second video interview of the series with Wexford FC, and today we are sitting down with Conor English, who's been with the side for every year from Shane Keegan's 2015 league winning side to the current new look side with Brian O'Sullivan. So, Conor, we'll just start with a simple one. So, do you want to tell us a bit about your training plan during the quarantine?
Yeah, well, personally, I suppose everyone is kind of doing their own individual stuff, which is difficult, like at times, because like we don't know when we're going to return to training. But I suppose I'm running quite a lot. I'm cycling. I'm doing a program just strengthening an injury I picked up actually at the start of the season. And Nigel, the physio, gave me one for the last 2 weeks, and I have a bit of equipment here at home, which is just kind of strength work, really. Like, just it kind of keeps you taking over and keeps you kind of looking forward to something, I suppose. Hopefully, to be back within the next couple of weeks or month at least.
Now, you can tell me if, look, I'm completely on the wrong track here altogether, but obviously Wexford, we're completely part-time side or even amateur side. Um, Players in our squad would have a lot more time on their hands. Do you think there'll be some players who might benefit from the amount of time they have available to them to train?
Yeah, I think so. Like the thing, I suppose, about the level or the level we're playing at. Like, I suppose we're an amateur club, but we like 90%, nearly all the players are doing something else full time, whether it's working or whether it's college, or just they might be even working part time. Like for me, I'm working full time, so like it's difficult because then you're going and you're bouncing straight into training of a Monday, Wednesday, sometimes an extra training session and games on a Friday, which is quite intense. But I do think people that they're given a bit of time now to maybe set a couple of plans in place. Like, I know personally, I wanted to kind of physically get stronger, and now I've kind of been given the time, not by choice, but been given the time to do that, and I'm benefiting from that, and fitness isn't really an issue at the moment with me, so I'm not too concerned on that side. But yeah, I suppose, as I said, personally, it's just kind of physically getting a bit stronger, and I think other players will fit into that kind of category as well. Like, whatever attribute they want to work on their game, whether it's just trying to get a little bit sharper and quicker, and doing long distance runs, all that kind of area. But yeah, definitely, I do think it does benefit a lot of lads. But it's a whole kind of a mental kind of thing as well. Like, in the sense, like, you have to be kind of self-driven, like, because it is probably a bit easy to fall into that lazy kind of mode for a lot of people.
I can definitely relate to that.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, completely respect the lads who can, commit to 5 or 6 days a week training at the moment. It's very hard to motivate. Away from quarantine training mode, which you are at the moment, it wasn't a great year for the club last year. I don't think anyone would say it was. But how much have things changed for you as a player this year compared to last year, say in the pre-season or in the first few league matches that we had? Is there a difference?
Yeah, well, like, I signed probably with a couple of months to go last season, and as you said, like, it was very difficult. Now, I wasn't expecting it obviously to be as hard as it was. Like, this season, Brian, in fairness, he's after assembling a brand new squad pretty much. I think me, maybe one or two others, are only there from last season's squad. Um, but massively, like, I think personally, like, I've come on leaps and bounds because obviously having known Brian and fell into a couple of months last year with him finishing the season, it was kind of frustrating for me in the sense that as the season was going on, I felt like I was getting stronger and didn't really want it to end. But unfortunately, that isn't the case. But this season, I suppose, the kind of the group of lads is it's brilliant. Like, there's a good buzz around the club again. You can kind of see it down at games and trainings, and Brian and Breener, they're excellent as well with the players. Like, I think a big thing is, like, every single player in that dressing room has respect for both of them, which I think is massive. But also the players have massive respect for each other. But like, even as I said, like going back to a personal kind of thing, like, I kind of committed this season. I wiped absolutely everything out of last season, the way things were going, for me, for players, the club. I think you just have to start fresh, like so. And like, I think it's after paying off quite a bit because I was delighted with how I started the season, especially pre-season. You get a good few performances in, and you hopefully bring it into the league campaign. And I know we didn't get as many games in as we wanted to because we were going quite well, but I do think like it was a nice note to kind of leave. Like, obviously the circumstances wasn't ideal, but there's a lot of confidence there, like amongst the squad.
Absolutely. So it's about 5 years, well, 5 seasons since you first started to play League of Ireland football. At this stage, do you have an idea of how much longer you want to stay at League of Ireland? Like, do you have an idea in your head of how long you want to go for?
Yeah, well, like it was always my ambition to play League of Ireland. Ever since I was a young lad, really, like that was kind of my goal as such. Like, some people might say to be professional footballer or whatever it may be. But it was always my goal to play League of Ireland. And it kind of killed me coming away from it when I left Wexford last time around. The circumstances, like the reason I suppose I left was because like it was very very tough commitment
Yeah.
at Premier Division football and being a pretty much not even a part-time club, like an amateur club.
Mhm.
And I don't think I was the only player in that kind of boat. Like, but I suppose like long term is to stay at Wexford as long as I can, and obviously like if you can put in good performances and you can do well, like I think there's a lot of examples in Wexford as a club that players have went on to further their career, like two or three, for example, that I played with that time, like to Ryan Delaney and Lee Graves, and last season Darragh O'Connor going on to Leicester. There's massive opportunity there. It's a great club in that sense, and like I think Brian has kind of a plan in process, and I think you can kind of see that within the age bracket of our squad is to maintain that squad, which is a great idea because hopefully sooner rather than later, but we might actually achieve something together. And I
Mhm.
think it's very doable because the squad that he has assembled is excellent in every sense.
Yeah. So before Wexford Youths, you were with Evergreen. Now, were you with Evergreen all the way back since you were a kid? Yeah.
No, no, I was
Or
only with actually for half a season was all.
oh,
Yeah, I played with Bridge United, which would be my local club, um, which they're in Kilkenny as well. But I played there until I was up until around 18, maybe 17, 18, and I actually went to Evergreen for half a season. That wasn't the intention, but and maybe a familiar name, Packy Holden, was over Evergreen at the time. I signed for him, and then Shane Keegan kind of came calling then within half a season, and I didn't really think twice about that.
so it was always your goal to play League of Ireland football. Was that sort of inspired by Kilkenny City?
Yeah, I think a little bit like, I would have only seen very few games of Kilkenny City like as a young lad, but I suppose when you see players like in Kilkenny that have went on to achieve like all the appearances playing League of Ireland and went on and actually furthered their career, um, like you see Packy Owen, an example, like he was over us and the team, likes of Graham Doyle, who's another big figure in Wexford, like he likes of him and David Mulcahy and like players like that, like you just kind of you want to like as a personally like you want to kind of set yourself a bar, like just play as high as you can, and hopefully like that's doable. But yeah, I think it's a big thing like in that sense.
Absolutely. So we've mentioned him a few times already, and we're going to mention him a lot more. But Shane Keegan, without saying who's better or anything like that, how similar or different are Shane Keegan and Brian O'Sullivan as managers?
They're they're both very good, but very different also.
Right. Yeah.
No, I find Shane like well, both of them very good tactically. Like you can relate to both of them quite well. But also the big thing I find like you can you can talk to both of them like individually. Like if there's any problems whatsoever, you can always pick up the phone and ring them, and vice versa. Like Shane like massively. Like I felt like the experience I had at Wexford for that 2 seasons was was excellent. Like some of the players you play with, there was obviously winning the league was outrageous. But the way Shane managed these players was a big thing and tactically went about games. And Brian the same, like as I think I think the results kind of show, like the results are kind of putting that into perspective, like of how well they do. Do you know what I mean? And I think massive credit still has to go to the people that work with them as well. Like Breener, for example, with Brian is excellent, and Shawnee Doyle was excellent the time he was there with Shane as well. Especially we had a bunch of kind of Kilkenny players down in Wexford that time, and it makes a big difference like for players coming in um, on their own as such. Like I came in at like maybe a later stage than some of the other guys.
Hmm. So we'll move on then to what I was really looking forward to talking about, not just because of the Shane Keegan interview that he did with Southeast lately, but I wanted to, have a great chat with someone on the current squad who's there in 2015. Obviously, you're the ideal candidate for that. So could you tell us then, you signed in around January 2015, as I remember. How high were your expectations for the season to come at that time, if you can remember?
Yeah, well, it was a strange one, like, and I think Shane kind of I listened to his interview the other day, and I think every player would say the same thing, like like that as well. Like there was actually a lot of new players, and he assembled, which actually we kind of found out as players ourselves after a few weeks, an excellent squad. Um, but like expectation wise, we went about like just kind of game by game. We done a good pre-season, and we didn't, as Shane said in the interview, we didn't overdo anything. Like we done everything right. Like the pretty much the basics right. Tactically went about games well and set up to kind of sometimes obviously try cancel out the opposition. Because there was a lot of good teams in that league at the time. But yeah, I think a lot of people would say the same thing. A lot of the players would say the same thing. Like the ability of the squad at that time was, it was outrageous to be honest. Like, and nobody was expecting maybe some of the players to kind of come together so quickly.
Yeah. In terms of the standard of that squad, just to give people an idea, if we had that squad in 2015 in the league now, do you think it would be winning the first division as well?
Absolutely, yeah, 100%, without a doubt. I just think when you see where some of the players are playing now, for example, like the likes of Eric Malloy and Ryan Delaney and Lee Grace, like Gary Delaney was centre half along with Lee, Aidan Keenan, Roxy, and Danny scoring multiple goals.
Yeah, in his prime, obviously.
It was more so the competitive side of the squad. People kind of get carried away, like with, um, like obviously it was difficult to make the 11 at times. You know what I mean? Like if you made the 11, like it was massive. Like, but even to make a squad for some players was difficult. There was a lot of players left at home at times, like, which was tough, and that was changing week in, week out. But yeah, no, to answer your question, absolutely, yeah, I definitely do think so.
Yeah, like I'm conscious there's fans we have today, for one reason or another, who weren't following the club in 2015, and I think the other sort of important figure in that squad, obviously Danny scoring the 30 goals, Shane Keegan the manager, is Graham Doyle on and off the pitch. His influence was massive. I remember it even as somebody who wasn't involved in the playing staff or anything like that. But can you give people a bit of an idea of just how much of an impact he had, in the dressing room as the captain of the team?
Yeah, I know Graham quite well, like, and he, like, in a playing sense, he played through he played through a pain barrier, and he set any high, like, but he's just off the field, like he could grab that squad like and just he give him such a lift in terms of if our performance is below standards, individually, like the way he talks to players, then obviously like he's the one player like that can put like obviously words into action, like in the sense that he's just an outrageous goalkeeper. Like I think he could have went on and played another couple of seasons, easily without a doubt. But in the sense, like I actually played under him then for a season in Kilkenny, and I think it'd be a massive mistake if he wasn't to go on and even do coaching roles and management. Obviously, other things come in the way of that and stuff like that. But yeah, he's just outrageous, like in that sense, as a person, as a player, and even very grounded as well, like because we never got carried away because likes of even Roxy, very similar to Graham, wouldn't let us,
Mm-hmm.
They've approached game by game with a good mentality.
Yeah, like what I found was basically when it obviously was a great season. There wasn't that many bad times, but there were a couple of days, couple of nights where you felt things weren't actually going to go your way, and I feel like that's where Graham really came into his best, was in picking up the squad. And something Shane definitely touched on in his interview was it was actually a poor start we had in the season. For whether we were going to be a league winning side or not, it wasn't a great start. How low was the mood at the time, if you can recall?
It was bad now, in fairness, because like we came off a very good pre-season. Like we went up to Bowls and we got good results, and everything was going so well. And Cabinteely, to be honest, we done everything. Like Shane and Shawnee, for example, like done all their homework properly, and just went up to Cabinteely, and maybe it was the occasion that got to us. And I'll never forget that because I actually started that night centre forward. I think I can't remember who was playing beside me, but it was just like that night was it was devastating in the sense that we lost that game, and then I think we lost the game after that, and then we were kind of going, maybe a lot of players were looking behind us rather than in front of us, and hopefully we finish a reasonable position this season.
Yeah.
I know there's a lot of playing still to do, but we did turn it around, and I think that showed. Maybe in the longer run, like the ability in the squad and the character mainly. I think that's what it came down to, is good character.
Yeah, I think there's a lesson to learn from that season, just in terms of your first three games, even if it's three league matches. If it's not going well, you don't have to worry yet, because our first couple of games in that 2015 season, before we had actually a really strong win, it wasn't that close in the end. I'll move on to just one last question before I go to the fan question, which is I don't know if you saw it on Facebook, but it's a really good one. In the Southeast Radio interview, if you haven't listened to it, by the way, people are listening in, please make sure to check it out. It's fantastic. The link is on it's on my own Facebook and Twitter, at least. I'll put it up on the post for this interview as well. But Shane always said his training sessions were fairly simple and straightforward. Is that how you remember it as well? And I have a follow up to this as well. Just I'll let you finish that one first, though.
Yeah, like there was nothing really over complicated, but it was down to the players. Like, at the end of the day, how you approach like the training sessions. Like you knew where you were coming home from a training session with that squad of players. Like the intensity was massive. Like how quick the games were, and it was just a thing like of getting up to speed. Like for me personally, like I obviously came from junior football, and I was one of the youngest members of the squad there. But like just the ability in that squad, the intensity, and like we only played sometimes, as Shane said in the interview, short-sighted games. But like there were games like players didn't really want to. We had to finish training, but players just wanted to play an extra 20 minutes, 25 minutes. In that sense, and because it was that enjoyable and it was that intense, and people knew they were kind of progressing.
Now, sort of the reason I ask is whether it's at this club or other clubs, but I think over the last 3 years or so, training drills have become incredibly complicated. Whether it's a training or pre-match, there's a huge amount of organisation to them. Do you think one approach is particularly better than the other, or do you think these things are getting slightly too complicated when you had Shane Keegan's side doing simple training sessions and winning the league with an amateur or a part-time side?
I don't know really. Like I think players at this level like should adapt to any kind of training session that is kind of put in place. Complicated or not complicated. Like obviously that worked, and what we're doing under Brian and Breener, some of it's the same. Some of it's quite it's interesting, like because we're obviously seeing things as players that are new to the coaching kind of system every week, like with some of the things that they're putting in place for us. But yeah, no, I think at this level, like everyone's playing football since they're young lads, like we've a lot of players in the squad, like a Dublin players, like that they'd be very well clued in, and they'd have a lot of coaching experiences and maybe have went down that path themselves, like actually the previous squad. I don't think that's necessarily an issue, no.
Cool. Great. I'll move on to the question from the fan. John Bulger submitted a great one. And so he asked if you could go through over the 5 seasons you were playing with Wexford, well, 5 years since you first started playing with Wexford, who were the best players in each position that you played with. So, I mean, starting with goalkeeper,
So
Graham Doyle is a shoe-in, I'd say.
is it just kind of goalkeeper, like every position, or
Oh, just goalkeeper, defender, midfield, striker.
yeah?
So, yeah, we'll start at the back.
Oh yeah, Graham Doyle. Yeah, there's not even a question. I don't think. Obviously, even knowing him from Kenny, like he was the same. He was saying playing junior football as well. Like just his standards just seem to get higher and higher and better. Yeah, without a doubt.
Yeah, like for a guy who started well into his 30s playing League of Ireland football, you would not have guessed.
And I'd well believe like he could have played at any level. To be honest, because even seeing him close up and training and stuff, and like it's one thing seeing games and stuff like and saves he'd make. Like even some of the stuff in training like is ridiculous.
Absolutely, yeah. No, that was always a nailed on one, I think. Now a very difficult one. Who was the best defender you played with?
Yeah,
That's tough. There's a lot of candidates, isn't there?
yeah, there is a lot of candidates because we signed a good few players at the time of the Premier season as well. That I got to play a couple of months of it. But I'd probably consistently have to go with likes of Lee Grace. I just thought he was, for a centre half, so complete. Technically, just so physical, like athletic, even his heading ability, everything really. Like, but also, also in the sense just like such a good leader as well. He's a real good player and never got kind of no surprise with where he's playing at the moment because he never really got carried away with himself. In any sense.
Absolutely, yeah. We'll give a few honourable mentions. Obviously, Ryan Delaney would be another. Gary
Yeah,
Delaney be up there as well.
you could name a lot of players like
Yeah,
Laney and Gary and Craig McCabe, but even Aidan Friel, who's playing for Shelburne at the moment, very full. Like he was excellent as well. Maybe I just didn't play with him long enough.
yeah. That's no problem. Okay, midfielder. I suppose we can split it into winger and centre mid if you want. I'll leave it entirely up to yourself.
I'd probably personally go for Peter Higgins.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought Higgy was excellent at the time he was playing centre midfield for Wexford. Like I always remember my very first appearance I think we played Bohemians in a pre-season friendly up in Dalymount, and I wouldn't have actually. I don't think I've played with him before that, even being from Kilkenny and all. But just excellent. Like he kind of control. He's kind of a number 6, and he just kind of controls that area. Like he just seems to have it off the tee. And I played with him then in Kilkenny last season, and same thing. Like just excellent on the ball and just getting around the field. And another player actually just a very good kind of a head and his shoulders in regards off the field as well. He's very good with players and younger players.
Absolutely, yeah. Now, for me, I've said it a number of times, but possibly the best player we ever had was Andy Mulligan.
Yeah,
It was a dreadful shame we didn't get to see him at his full potential last season.
there's a lot of players again, like defenders. Like there's a lot of players that like if Eric was on the right wing, Craig Wall was centre mid as well at that time. Andy Mulligan. He could. There's a whole list. And Johnny Bonner was unplayable. Like at times when he was playing. Um, and then sure, I suppose I never really got to play with Dean Brothers, like who's an excellent player as well. But I didn't really get to play with him much of the time I was at Wexford. He was nearly out all season that year.
Yeah, he's a player. He was with the club for a very very long time. He developed a lot over the years. I felt, and he was just a great player to have around the club. Absolutely. Um, is there only one name for forward?
Yeah, well, I think so. In a lot of people's eyes, like I think you could say Danny, but like Danny was obviously just ridiculous goal scorer. I think Shane kind of said it in his interview the other day as well. He related to anything within the box. Like he was so clinical, and he made it very hard to try to get in that Wexford team. At times as well. Like I said, Roxy, two very different players, but I don't know. Like you're looking at the three of them, and I kind of or the two of them, Roxy and Danny, but then Paul Murphy joined in the Premier season, and like I don't know, I'd nearly say he was probably the best player I've played with. Like even within training or anything, like just the ability he has is outrageous. It's just another player that you think could play at any level as well.
Perfect. That's great. Thanks very much, Connor. We'll have more interviews to come over the coming weeks and months, potentially. If there are any particular people from the current squad or around the club that you'd like to hear from, please feel free to let me know. And if you have any questions as well, just drop them in the comments. So thanks very much, and you can join us again.
Thanks, man.